There comes a moment in every life when you have to stop. Just stop and ask yourself, when did I start living for everyone else and forget to live for myself? Because the hard truth is, you can't truly connect with others until you're first connected to yourself. People-pleasing is often misunderstood as a noble trait, something admirable, even virtuous. We're taught from a young age to be agreeable, polite, and helpful. And while kindness is certainly a virtue, there is a dangerous line we often cross without realizing it. The line where kindness becomes self-sacrifice and helpfulness turns into self-abandonment. People-pleasing at its core is not about love or generosity. It's about fear. The fear of rejection. The fear of disappointing others. The fear of being seen as difficult, selfish, or unworthy. And in trying to be everything to everyone, you forget who you really are. You see, every time you say yes to something you don't want to do, you're saying no to something within yourself. You trade your authenticity for acceptance, your truth for validation. It's not an equal exchange. It's emotional depth. And over time it adds up. Slowly but surely you become disconnected from your needs, your desires, your voice. You find yourself exhausted, resentful, and confused, not because people are taking too much from you, but because you keep giving them what you don't actually have. People-pleasing looks like being agreeable in meetings when you disagree with everything being said. It looks like saying, "I'm fine," when you're not. It looks like laughing at jokes that hurt you, accepting invitations you dread, and pretending to be okay with situations that eat away at your peace. And the tragedy is, the more you people-please, the more people expect you to keep doing it. You train the world to believe you're always available, always okay, always willing. You create a false version of yourself and then become trapped in maintaining it. This isn't just about emotional exhaustion. It's about identity. When you habitually people-please, you begin to lose sight of who you are. Your decisions stop reflecting your own values and begin to reflect everyone else's expectations. You're no longer living your life. You're performing in someone else's version of it. And every time you act against your true feelings to make someone else comfortable, you reinforce the idea that your needs are less important, less urgent, less worthy. But let's go deeper. Why do we do this? Why do we sacrifice ourselves to keep others happy? Often it's rooted in childhood experiences. Maybe you grew up in an environment where love was conditional, where being good meant being quiet, obedient, or helpful. Maybe you learned that making others happy was the only way to feel safe or seen. Over time, this belief system solidifies. You stop asking, "What do I want?" and instead of asking, "What will make them stay?" It becomes a survival mechanism. But here's the hard truth. What kept you safe back then is now keeping you stuck. You can't grow when you're busy shrinking yourself to fit into everyone else's mold. You can't thrive when your self-worth depends on other people's comfort. People-pleasing may have started as a way to avoid conflict or rejection, but now it's become the very thing that disconnects you from real intimacy. Because real connection, deep soul-level connection, can only happen when you show up as your whole self, not your edited self, not your pleasing self, your true self. And when you people-please, you rob others of the chance to know the real you. Think about that. You might be surrounded by people who admire you, but they don't actually know you. They know the version of you that bends, adapts, and hides in order to be liked. And the most painful part, deep down, you know it. That hollow feeling, that quiet ache, it comes from the awareness that you're not being seen. Not because others refuse to see you, but because you stopped showing them who you are. So how do you break the cycle? It starts with courage. The courage to disappoint people. The courage to speak when your voice shakes. The courage to stand firm in your values, even when others don't understand. It's not easy. In fact, at first it may feel like rejection. People might resist your boundaries, challenge your choices, or walk away. Let them. Because the ones who love you for your compliance were never really loving you at all. They were loving what you could offer them. Your time, your energy, your silence. But something amazing happens when you stop people-pleasing. The people who remain in your life are there because they love you, not your performance. And that kind of connection, that's rare. That's real. When you honor your own needs, you give others permission to do the same. When you show up authentically, you attract others who value authenticity. It's not about shutting people out. It's about showing them what it looks like to live with integrity. It's about creating relationships based on truth, not obligation. So remember this. Every time you choose to please others at the cost of yourself, you disconnect a little more from your truth. But every time you honor your truth, even when it's hard, you take a step closer to real connection, starting with the one person who matters most, you. Saying no is one of the most powerful things you can do for yourself, yet for many people, it feels like betrayal. We're conditioned to believe that saying yes makes us good, agreeable, and kind. That declining a request or setting a boundary is rude, selfish, or even mean. So we default to saying yes. Yes to overtime. Yes to emotional labor. Yes to plans we don't want. Yes to people who drain us. But here's the reality. Every time you say yes when you mean no, you silently teach others that your time, energy, and peace are negotiable. That they can take from you without asking if you have anything left to give. That your presence is guaranteed, even at the expense of your well-being. And this is how people begin to disrespect you, not always out of malice, but out of habit, because you allowed it. Boundaries are not walls to keep people out. They are guidelines that show people how to love and respect you. They are declarations of self-worth. They say, this is where I end and you begin. They say, I value myself enough to protect my peace. When you set a boundary, you're not rejecting the other person, you're affirming yourself. You're saying, I matter too. And the people who genuinely care about you will respect that. They may not like it at first. They may be surprised, even uncomfortable. But those who are emotionally mature will eventually understand, because they know that real relationships are built on mutual respect, not silent resentment. Too often we confuse pleasing with connecting. We think that being agreeable makes us lovable. We think that if we just keep saying yes, people will never leave. But in reality, this constant compliance builds invisible resentment. It makes you bitter, exhausted, and detached. You may continue to smile on the outside, but inside, you're quietly breaking down. You start avoiding people you used to care about, not because you dislike them, but because being around them means betraying yourself again. This is not connection. This is emotional erosion. The very people you're trying to hold onto begin to feel like a burden, not because of who they are, but because of who you pretend to be around them. Setting boundaries is how you end that cycle. It's how you restore balance. It might start with something small, declining a call when you're tired, asking for space when you feel overwhelmed, or simply saying, "I can't help with that right now." It feels awkward at first. You'll wrestle with guilt. You'll hear a voice in your head saying you're letting people down. But that voice isn't your truth. It's your training. It's the echo of a life lived for approval. And the only way to silence that voice is to practice the opposite. Practice standing your ground. Practice discomfort. Practice self-respect. Every time you assert a boundary, you build strength. You reinforce the message that your needs are valid. You stop giving people the blueprint to overstep you, and with time you'll notice something remarkable. Your relationships get better, not worse. The tension lifts because the expectations become clear. You're no longer performing, pretending, or placating. You're showing up as your full self, and that self demands to be respected, and the right people, those who see you, hear you, and value you, will rise to meet your standards. They won't just tolerate your boundaries, they'll appreciate them, because healthy people understand that boundaries create safety, not separation. It's also important to understand that people who push back against your boundaries are often those who benefited from your lack of them. They may try to guilt-trip you, shame you, or paint you as selfish. But their reaction is not your responsibility. Their discomfort is not your burden to carry. You are not responsible for managing other people's feelings at the cost of your own sanity. You are allowed to disappoint others. You are allowed to inconvenience them, because their comfort should never come at the expense of your truth. Respect is earned, not demanded, and it starts with how you treat yourself. When you respect your time, others will too. When you respect your energy, others will learn to be mindful of it. But you can't teach people to value you if you're constantly overextending, overcommitting, and overgiving. You can't build self-worth while living in a cycle of self-neglect. Real respect doesn't come from being agreeable. It comes from being consistent, honest, and clear. There's a quiet power in someone who knows where they stand. Someone who can say no without anger, without apology, without guilt. Someone who can look at a situation and say, "This doesn't align with who I am, so I'll pass." That kind of self-possession is rare, and it's magnetic. People may not always like it, but they'll respect it, and that respect becomes the foundation for real connection. When you start to set boundaries, you reclaim your life. You take back your time, your voice, your emotional clarity. You begin to live more intentionally. You become someone who no longer reacts out of obligation, but responds from a place of self-respect. And in doing so, you give others permission to do the same. Remember, boundaries are not barriers, they are bridges to better relationships. They don't push people away, they allow the right people in, the ones who see your value, honor your truth, and respect your no just as much as your yes. And those are the people worth keeping. Putting yourself first is often misunderstood in a world that glamorizes hustle, self-sacrifice, and endless availability. From a young age, many of us are taught that prioritizing our own needs is selfish, that good people always put others ahead of themselves, that love means giving until it hurts. But the truth is, there is nothing selfish about self-respect. There is nothing wrong with honoring your own well-being. In fact, putting yourself first is one of the most courageous and loving things you can do, not just for yourself, but for everyone around you. Because when you neglect yourself, you'll just suffer alone. Your relationships, your energy, your creativity, and your sense of peace all begin to deteriorate. Imagine trying to give water from an empty cup. You might offer it out of duty, out of guilt, out of fear of being seen as unkind, but the reality is you have nothing left to give. You're depleted, running on fumes, hoping no one notices how tired and stretched you are. That's what happens when you live a life where everyone else comes first. You become a shadow of who you could be. You stop growing, you lose your fire, and over time that neglect doesn't just impact your mental health, it impacts how you show up in every part of your life. When you put yourself last, your relationships suffer. You might think you're being kind or loyal, but the truth is people can feel when your giving is coming from a place of depletion instead of abundance. They may not always be able to name it, but they sense it. You're not present, you're not joyful, you're not free, and worse, you start to resent the very people you're trying to please. You give, and when it's not returned or even appreciated, that bitterness begins to build. You start to feel used, unseen, taken for granted, and that resentment quietly poisons connection, turning once healthy relationships into sources of stress and anxiety. Now contrast that with someone who puts themselves first. They don't do it with arrogance or entitlement. They do it with clarity. They know their worth. They know their limits. They are honest about what they need. They rest when they are tired. They say no when something doesn't feel right. They make time for the things that nourish them, and because they're full, they give from a place of joy, not duty. They show up with energy, with love, with focus. Their presence is a gift, not a burden. Their yes means something because it's not given out of guilt, it's given with intention. Putting yourself first also means taking radical responsibility for your life. It means no longer waiting for others to take care of you, to validate you, to save you. It means recognizing that you are in charge of your peace, your growth, your happiness. And that's a powerful shift, because when you stop outsourcing your worth, you start living on your terms. You make decisions that align with your values. You create space for your dreams. You break free from cycles of burnout, codependency, and chronic dissatisfaction. This doesn't mean you stop caring about others. On the contrary, putting yourself first allows you to love people better, because now your love comes from overflow, not obligation. Your time is given freely, not resentfully. You listen without impatience. You help without expecting something in return. You're no longer sacrificing yourself. In the process of being there for others, you've made yourself whole first, and from that wholeness, you give the best version of yourself to the people who matter. There's also something deeply attractive about someone who knows how to prioritize themselves. They radiate confidence. They move through the world with a calm sense of purpose. They don't chase validation because they've already claimed their worth. They don't over-explain their decisions or apologize for their needs. They are grounded, centered, powerful, and the world takes notice. Because when you respect yourself, others are more likely to respect you too. But this kind of self-prioritization doesn't just happen, it requires intention. It means you have to unlearn the guilt that tells you are selfish for resting. You have to silence the inner critic that calls you lazy when you choose peace over productivity. You have to challenge the patterns that kept you small so others could feel big. You have to understand that putting yourself first isn't about being better than anyone. It's about refusing to be less than you are. The truth is, your life is yours, not your parents', not your partners', not your bosses', not your friends'. You get one shot at this, and if you spend it constantly dimming your light so others can shine, you'll miss the very purpose you were meant to fulfill. You are not here to live someone else's version of your life. You are here to stand tall in your truth, to honor your needs, and to chase the things that set your soul on fire. So start saying no without guilt. Start resting without apology. Start protecting your time like it's gold, because it is. Prioritize your mental health. Eat well. Move your body. Set boundaries. Invest in your dreams. And know this. Every time you choose yourself, you become more powerful, more peaceful, and more connected. Not just to others, but to the very core of who you are. That is not selfish. That is self-respect. And that is the foundation of a life worth living. Real connection doesn't begin with perfection. It begins with truth. But many people live under the illusion that to be accepted, they must be flawless, agreeable, and impressive. So they put on a mask. They hide their flaws, silence their opinions, and carefully curate a version of themselves they believe others will like. At first, this strategy might seem to work. People respond to the performance, smile, they nod, they engage, but underneath it all there's a deep, unsettling hollowness, because no matter how many people seem to like you, you can't shake the feeling that they don't really know you. And that because they only know the version of you that you've allowed them to see. Authenticity is the antidote to that emptiness. It's the path back to real connection, not just with others, but with yourself. It's the decision to show up as you are, not as who you think others want you to be. And that's not always easy. We're raised in a culture that prizes image over integrity, likability over honesty. We're taught to read the room, to adjust, to fit in. But every time you adjust yourself to be accepted, you lose a little bit of your identity. You water yourself down, you shrink. And over time, you become a stranger in your own life, surrounded by people, yet completely alone. The truth is, you can only truly connect with others to the extent that you're willing to be yourself. People can't connect with a mask. They may admire it, but they can't bond with it. It's only when you speak from the heart, when you share your fears, your passions, your beliefs, and your wounds, that real relationships form. Vulnerability is not weakness. It's the glue that binds people together. When you open up, you invite others to do the same. You create a space where realness is safe, where pretenses fall away, and where the soul feels seen. Many people are afraid to be authentic because they're scared of rejection. What if people don't like the real me? What if they walk away? What if I lose everything I've built by being honest? But the better question is, what do you lose by not being honest? What does it cost you to live behind a mask? Peace, joy, intimacy, purpose. These are the things you sacrifice when you choose to perform instead of live. And if someone does walk away because of your truth, let them. Their departure isn't a loss. It's a clearing. It's making space for the kind of people who will love and respect you for who you really are, not who you pretend to be. Authenticity also means owning your flaws, not hiding them. not apologizing for them, but embracing them as part of your human experience. You are not perfect, and you are never meant to be. Your imperfections are not liabilities, they are doorways to connection. When you admit you're struggling, when you acknowledge your mistakes, when you drop the act and get real, others see themselves in you because they're struggling too. They've made mistakes too. They've felt fear, sadness, and shame. And in your honesty, they find relief. They find the courage to be honest too. There is tremendous freedom in living without the pressure to impress. You get to speak your truth even if your voice shakes. You get to follow your own path even if others don't understand it. You get to honor your feelings, your instincts, and your values. And instead of feeling exhausted from constantly trying to be enough, you feel empowered by simply being you. There's a lightness in that kind of life, a quiet confidence, because when you're no longer worried about fitting in, you finally find where you belong. The irony is, the more authentic you are, the more deeply you connect with others. People crave realness in a world full of filters, edited highlight reels, and surface-level interactions. Authenticity stands out. It cuts through the noise. It draws people in, not everyone, but the right ones. The people who resonate with your truth, the ones who see your soul and say, I understand. That kind of connection is rare. But it's only possible when you stop pretending and start showing up as yourself. Being authentic doesn't mean you never grow or change. In fact, it's the opposite. When you're honest with yourself, you become aware of the areas where you need healing, where you need to evolve. And you do so from a place of love, not shame. You grow not to please others, but to become more aligned with your own values and purpose. That's the most powerful kind of transformation, one that's rooted in self-awareness and guided by truth. So if you're tired of surface-level relationships, of feeling unknown even when surrounded by people, of constantly trying to be what others want, let this be your wake-up call. You don't need to be perfect to be loved. You don't need to be impressive to be worthy. You don't need to earn connection by being who you're not. The real you, the one beneath the mask, beneath the fear, is enough, always has been. You teach people how to treat you by what you allow, what you tolerate, and what you reinforce. Every time you let someone cross a boundary without consequence, you send a silent message. This is okay. You can do this again. Whether you realize it or not, your behavior becomes a blueprint for others. You show them what is acceptable in your world by how you respond or fail to respond to their action. If you let disrespect slide, you invite more of it. If you stay quiet when you're hurt, you suggest your feelings don't matter. And if you consistently put yourself last, people will assume that's your place. It's not about blame, it's about responsibility, the power to shape the way you are treated. You cannot control how others behave, but you can control what you accept. If someone continuously ignores your needs, disrespects your time, or takes advantage of your kindness, and you keep showing up as if nothing is wrong, you become complicit in your own mistreatment. You may do it out of fear, out of habit, out of a deep need to be liked, but eventually this pattern erodes your self-worth. Because deep down, you know you're betraying yourself. You know you're teaching others that their comfort is more important than your dignity. The moment you decide to stop tolerating less than you deserve, everything changes. It doesn't require drama, shouting, or revenge. It requires clarity. Calm, firm, unapologetic clarity. A quiet inner shift where you say, I don't accept this anymore. And from that moment forward, your energy begins to change. People can feel it. The ones who took advantage of your silence may push back. They may accuse you of being cold, distant, or selfish, but their discomfort isn't your problem. It's the consequence of them no longer being able to use you. Teaching people how to treat you means setting standards and enforcing them. It's not enough to say, I don't like being spoken to that way, if you continue the conversation as if nothing happened. It's not enough to say, I need more respect, if you keep staying in situations that rob you of it. Your actions must match your words. That's where the power is, in the follow-through, in walking away when someone refuses to meet your standard, in choosing peace over people-pleasing, in holding space for your work, even when it means being alone for a while. The irony is, when you start raising your standards, you don't lose connection, you improve it. Yes, some people will fall away, but the ones who remain, they're the ones who truly value you. They'll rise to meet your standards, not because you forced them to, but because they respect the clarity of your self-worth. And those are the relationships that last, the ones built on mutual respect, not silent resentment, on honesty, not obligation, on freedom, not fear. One of the hardest parts of this journey is letting go of the guilt, especially if you spend most of your life putting others first, saying yes to keep the peace, or pretending everything is fine just to avoid conflict. But guilt is not always a sign you're doing something wrong. Sometimes it's a sign you're doing something different, something unfamiliar, something necessary. Growing into your worth can feel uncomfortable, not because it's wrong, but because you've been conditioned to shrink. But you were not born to be a doormat. You were not put here to bend endlessly just to be accepted. You are not required to tolerate behavior that depletes you. Your kindness should never come at the cost of your self-respect. You can be loving and still say no. You can be generous and still protect your time. You can be compassionate and still walk away from people who mistreat you. These things are not contradictions. They are signs of emotional maturity. When you finally decide to teach people how to treat you, your life begins to change in ways that feel both scary and liberating. You start to realize how much energy you wasted trying to control other people's perceptions. You stop explaining yourself to those committed to misunderstanding you. You begin to show up more fully, more confidently, more at peace. And even though not everyone will like the new you, the real you, that's okay, because the people who are meant to be in your life will not require you to betray yourself to stay in theirs. The respect you seek from others starts with the respect you give yourself. When you draw a line, when you speak your truth, when you enforce your boundaries, you send a message to the world. I matter. My voice matters. My feelings matter. And slowly but surely the people around you begin to adjust. Because people treat you based on the standards you set. And when your standards are rooted in self-love, self-respect, and self-awareness, the treatment you receive reflects that. So start small if you have to. Say no without explaining. Speak up when something doesn't feel right. Take time for yourself without apologizing. These are not selfish acts. They are declarations of worth. And the more you practice them, the stronger you become. You're not here to be everything to everyone. You're here to be whole. You're here to be real. And the people who truly love you will honor that. Teach people how to treat you, not through words alone, but through the life you choose to live. A life where respect is not begged for, but expected. Where love is not conditional, but mutual. Where your presence is not taken for granted, but deeply valued. That's not selfish, that's powerful. And that's how you build a life filled with real connection. When you let go of the need for external approval, you unlock a level of inner peace that is rare in today's world. For most of us, the desire to be liked and accepted is deeply ingrained. It starts early when we learn that praise brings reward and disagreement brings discomfort. We begin to tailor our words, our actions, even our personalities to win the approval of others. Our parents, teachers, friends, bosses, and partners. Over time, this habit becomes second nature. We measure our worth based on how others respond to us. We question our choices if they aren't met with applause. We silence our opinions if they make others uncomfortable. But the truth is, living for approval is a trap. It keeps you small, anxious, and constantly second-guessing yourself. And worst of all, it never ends, because no matter how much approval you get, it's never enough if you don't approve of yourself. Seeking validation is exhausting. It forces you into roles you were never meant to play. You become whoever you think others want you to be, losing touch with your true self in the process. You say yes when you mean no. You smile when you're hurting. You hide your desires because you're afraid they won't be understood. And slowly, you begin to disappear beneath layers of people-pleasing and self-betrayal. It's a quiet kind of suffering. The kind that looks fine on the outside, but feels hollow on the inside. You might be liked, even admired, but you don't feel truly seen. Because how can anyone see you when you're not showing up as yourself? Letting go of the need for approval means reclaiming your authenticity. It means deciding that your truth matters more than someone else's opinion. It means getting comfortable with being misunderstood, judged, or even disliked, not because you enjoy it, but because you refuse to twist yourself into something you're not, just to avoid it. That's not arrogance. It's self-respect. And it's the beginning of real freedom. When you stop chasing validation, your decisions become clearer. You start asking, what feels right to me? Instead of, what will they think? You begin to live in alignment with your values, not someone else's expectations. And even though this path can be lonely at times, it's also deeply fulfilling. Because every step you take is yours, not borrowed, not forced, not performed, but chosen. And there is nothing more empowering than walking a path you chose for yourself. Releasing the need for approval also improves your relationships. At first it might feel like you're risking connection by being real, but in reality, you're creating space for deeper, more honest connections to form. When you're no longer trying to impress or please, you can be present. You can listen with openness, not defensiveness. You can share with vulnerability, not performance. And you attract people who value you for who you are, not for what you can do for them or how well you play a role. These are the relationships that nourish your soul, the ones where you don't have to pretend, compete, or explain. Of course, breaking free from the need for approval doesn't happen overnight. It's a process. You'll still hear the echo of other people's expectations in your mind. You'll still feel the pull to conform, to please, to be accepted. But every time you choose your truth over their opinion, that voice gets quieter. Every time you honor your feelings instead of ignoring them to avoid conflict, your confidence grows. And eventually your need to be liked will shrink beneath your need to be real. This doesn't mean you become indifferent or rude. It doesn't mean you stop caring about others or ignore feedback. It means you learn to filter external input through the lens of self-awareness. You consider it, but you don't let it control you. You hear it, but you don't let it control you. You hear it, but you don't hand over your identity to it. You recognize that feedback is information, not a verdict on your worth. The most powerful approval is the one you give yourself. It's waking up in the morning and knowing you are proud of how you're living, even if no one else notices. It's looking in the mirror and knowing you are enough. Not because everyone says so, but because you've decided to believe it. That kind of self-approval can't be taken away by someone's disapproval. It's yours, earned through honesty, integrity, and courage. So if you're tired of living on the emotional roller coaster of approval seeking, step off. Come back to yourself, reconnect with what you value, what you believe, what you need. Trust that you don't have to be everything to everyone to be worthy of love and respect. You just have to be you, the real you. And yes, some people won't like it, some will leave. But the ones who stay, they're staying for the right reasons. They're staying because they see you, not the mask, not the performance, but the person behind it. And that kind of connection is rare, sacred, and real. You don't need to chase approval to be enough. You already are. Stop looking outside for what can only be found within. Stand tall in who you are. Approve of your own life and let everything else fall into place.